There's been more tragedy and trouble down in Australia, and it's not the mushroom lady this time. Today we're going to be talking about a jealous cop who was so scorned that once it was known to him that he wasn't going to have a chance with this man, he made sure nobody else would. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. Sofa's back here with Mr. Roscoe. Now, I did have to move his plaque over there because he just got too possessive over it, but that's that. Now, my name's Paul if you're new to the channel. Now, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about a very tragic, absolutely unnecessary situation, case, deaths that have happened down in Australia. Now, what we'll do is, this is kind of the way the video is going to be laid out here. We're going to be reviewing a timeline from The Guardian, the publication The Guardian. We're going to be doing news clips. We're going to be looking at text messages. We're going to be looking at like just all this different stuff, right? So that's how it will be. I'll offer some commentary along the way, and then we'll talk about it towards the end of the video. Now, before we do jump in, if you want to follow Roscoe and I outside of here, the YouTube, you can check us out on the Instagram. Check us out over there. We do little Instagrammy things, but we're still kind of dorks, but you know, that's just our little vibe here. Now, what I want to do is first and foremost talk about the three main people, victims / alleged perpetrator in this case. Now, before we even get started talking about them, because we're going to talk about Jesse Baird first, but I want it to be known that Jesse Baird was not in a relationship with Bo, the cop who allegedly took him and his boyfriend's life. Looking through this, I've seen a lot of stuff, and my thought at first too was this was some kind of like love triangle or something like that, but that is absolutely not the case. People who knew them closely are kind of offended by how this narrative has gone off in the media and stuff like that. He was actively trying to get rid of this dude, right? And we'll get to the reasons why behind that. But just know going into it so that there's not any confusion. Jesse was not in a relationship with this dude. There was like some kind of a situation that had gone on with them, but this was not like, hey, we're a happy little couple and that type of thing at all. So just let that be known. So that being said, let's first talk about Jesse. So Jesse was an Australian news presenter. He was also an Australian rules football goal umpire. He was only 26 years old. Now, his friend describes him, or friends, I should say, describe him as somebody that seems just like a very vibrant, contagious personality kind of a person.
We stood there on the beach and we screamed out his name in his honor because that's who Jesse was. He was bold, he was loud, he was happy, he was fun.
And I imagine to be a TV presenter and to have the kind of resume that he does, you would have to have that kind of personality, right? So next was his boyfriend, Luke Davies. He was a flight attendant, and let's listen to what some people had to say about him.
Dean, you're one of the last to contact Luke. Can you share the message you guys had?
Yep, Lukey messaged me. We'd always send funny Instagram memes back and forth to each other. And so, I received one at 9:18 the morning of the incident. And it was a funny Instagram meme and followed by a crying laughter emoji, which is pretty much what Luke was like. I could picture him actually physically laughing as he sent that message. And so to know that within 30 minutes after that, things took a turn for the worse and the unimaginable happened. And it's heartbreaking to think what went on from that message that he sent to me.
Can you imagine? I think that's something we're all familiar with, sending our friends, TikToks, memes, all that kind of stuff, and laughing and to know what unfolded a little bit later. And I'm sure he's going back and reading over his previous messages, with just a heartbreak. It gives me absolute goosebumps. Now, let's move on to the alleged perp. I don't know how they do it in Australia. I say alleged up here before somebody has been convicted. I mean, the guy's all but confessed to my knowledge, but nonetheless. So his name is Bo Lamar Condon. He was a cop, but he was also like this person that tried to portray a very lavish, celebrity-esque type of lifestyle. Colleagues would basically be scratching their head like, we don't know where he has the money to be living like this. As you can see, he was real big on like getting celebrity selfies, picturing himself Louis Vuitton, Hermes, this, that, lavish vacations. You do have to wonder, where did this come from? Okay, so those are the three main people names we're going to be talking about in this video. Now let's go over to like kind of an overview of what took place, and then we'll move on into that more precise timeline. So like I said, Channel 10 host Jesse Baird was with Qantas flight attendant Luke Davies. Now, they seemingly just kind of like disappeared, right? But remember, this all happened very quickly, what we're talking about here. And also, just as soon as they kind of disappeared, an ex-acquaintance of Jesse's, the cop named Bo, we're just going to go with his first name Bo for now. Lamar Condon is his last name, but for simplicity reasons, we're just going to go with Bo. He comes into the spotlight, like almost right away. Okay, so let's talk about that relationship between the two and kind of how this led to where we're at. So Jesse and Bo met at a nightclub, and from what it sounds like, it was basically a friends with benefits type situation going on. So Jesse really didn't want to pursue a relationship. He had been in one. He just wasn't vibing that at this point in time. Now, a friend says, and this is the part I was talking about in some interviews and stuff, that they were never boyfriends, that he was a celebrity chaser who would not take no for an answer. So allegedly at one point, Lamar Bo, he posts these pictures or videos or something on Instagram that was almost giving this energy like he and Jesse are together. And this is when Jesse is 100% like, bro, like, you got to go. And so Jesse wrote a text message and he sent it to a friend that was like breaking things off. And in fact, let's go ahead and read that text message now. So you'll see it on your screen here. And it says, Bo, I feel hurt and like I'm being lied to. This afternoon, I gave you a chance to tell me the truth, and I don't think you did that. There have been many examples that have been brought to me since we met that show you've acted in a way that's completely inappropriate. I'm not going to stand for it anymore. I think it's best if we focus on ourselves and stop seeing each other. I have thought long and hard about this and know that it's the right decision for me. I would appreciate it if you could refrain from contacting me. Then he says, remember, this is not to Bo, but this is to his friend. Like, hey, is this what I should do? He says, short and sweet. And the other friend says, yeah, I think that's okay. Just be prepared for him to try and explain himself. If you've dealt with these personality types, you already know how hard they are to get rid of, right? So this is what's scary, is when you see this going on. And we're going to talk about some of the weird stuff that was going on leading up to this and whatnot that was like, oh my God, especially coming off, if you follow my other stuff and videos that we do, where we talked about that documentary, Lover, Stalker, Killer, whatever the name of it was, I can't remember exactly now. You just see how unhinged people can get just like that. So like I said, they're friends, they're doing their thing. Bo wants more than this, whatever. Jesse's like, nope. So this is when, they break things off or whatever. I just wanted to be casual right now, right? That's where Jesse's coming from. And then as you heard from the text, whatever you've done, we need to go our separate ways. So, but then like weird stuff had been happening along the way. At one point, Jesse was like, I was followed home by a cop car. At another point, he had told his good friend Corey, he was like, I felt like somebody was like standing over me. And when I got up, like I see my phone and wallet are stolen. Now, he never got his phone back, but somebody reached out to him on Instagram with his wallet. They found it nearby or something like that. So that's completely bizarre, right? Now, another time he told his same friend, he was like, my followers on Instagram, they're like disappearing, and not like unfollowed, but like somebody's kicking them off or something weird like that you could tell his account was being hacked. Now, police would also allege that Bo used his key, got in, deleted contacts and messages on his phone. And then another time, Jesse caught Bo going through his phone, and Bo was like, oh, it's just, I was turning the alarm off, it's all good. So you can see this creepy behavior leading up, right? We'll talk about it more towards the end or whatever, but I can just kind of envision this personality type and how things were probably going, and just the collision that nobody expected to happen. And let's listen to one of the friends talk about some of the instances of things that happened.
Police allege Bo Lamar Condon was infatuated with the Channel 10 reporter. Jesse's car had been vandalised and sabotaged.
Jesse couldn't come to see me because mysteriously water came into his car engine.
And all of this would escalate until the absolute unthinkable would happen. Now what I want to do is move into that timeline I talked about. And what we're going to do is we're going to put different screenshots up here, kind of summarize each one, go over it. This is an article by The Guardian. It's an online publication. I'll post it down below. You can go read the whole thing verbatim if you want to get more in depth with it than we do here. So February 16th, we have this up on the screen. And so basically what this is saying is that Bo took a force-issued handgun from storage. He was going to be using this in an event. Essentially, we see this over here in the States too, where like, say, concerts, things like that, they hire off-duty police officers. Like, they pay the officers themselves, right? So it's like a police officer, but it's like extra work or side money. They're not there on business of the police. It's like private security, that type of situation. And it sounds like that's what he was doing here. So he had this gun. Now remember, because he used a police-issued weapon to do this crime, which I'm just like, what? Now, allegedly, he stole bullets from somewhere else so as not to leave evidence of like police issued bullets. So probably his thinking was, I'm going to use my police issued weapon, but I'll use different bullets that don't come from the cops so that way they can't trace it, I don't know what the thinking was, but maybe that made sense in his world. Moving on, we have Monday, February 19th. Now, this starts off at 9:50 a.m., and this is when gunshots would be heard at Baird's home in Paddington. Now, these weren't reported until days later. There is an emergency phone call that's made. It sounds like over there, we have 911 here, but it's 000. This came from Luke's phone, but it never goes through, right, before the operator gets to it. Now, after this is when the rental car happened. We're going to look at some footage in a second, but Bo rents a white Toyota Hiace van from the airport. Now, after that, he starts making these partial admissions to an acquaintance. And again, we're going to talk more about that as well. So then they have this, at some point, the police say that Tuesday, Wednesday, he drives this van to Cronulla, discards some personal items, and of the two victims and whatnot. Now, let's go ahead and look at some of that footage real quick.
New vision obtained by 9 News shows a man in a black cap pulling up in a black SUV on that morning, 25 metres from Jesse's house. He gets out and then drives away at 9 a.m. 50 minutes later, the two young men are allegedly gunned down with his police-issued pistol.
Now, remember when we talked about those gunshots momentarily, there has been evidence of the gunshots on like a Ring camera or something like that has been turned over. Now, let's look at what happens just a little bit later that day.
The following day, police alleged he returned to the house in a rented van he used to move the bodies.
Now, he would also end up asking a fellow cop, co-worker, whatever you want to call her, to help him clean the van out by using her hose, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So one thing to keep in mind with this is there's not only these two direct victims, whose lives he took, he pulled in all different people unknowingly to this situation and this crime, not to mention the victims of loved ones, the community, the parents, you name it, right? This guy had no low. Now we're going to move on to February 21st. This is Wednesday. So in the morning around 11 a.m. they find bloodied items and stuff like that in a bin, and a garbage dump is what we call them here in the South. 1 p.m. police discover large amounts of blood when they go to Jesse's home over there in Paddington. Then they search Davies' home in Waterloo. Now during the same day, they say that Bo attends a Bungonia property near Goulburn with an acquaintance. Now, we're going to talk about this in a second. The acquaintance is described by police as an innocent agent, and Bo and the acquaintance allegedly buy an angle grinder and a padlock from the hardware store in the area before driving to the gates of the property. Bo then cuts the padlock with a grinder and proceeds into the property in the hired van. The acquaintance says they wait at the entrance at the top of the property for about half an hour. So keep this in mind. Now, let's go to part 2 of this day. They say the acquaintance who visited the property with Lamar is a long-term friend of the accused, and we don't believe she was fully aware of what had taken place. They do believe that he had scoped this property out, and he knew about this through a former relationship, so this is an area that he knew of. Now, 11 p.m., he buys some weights from a department store, and then he returns to the rural property near Goulburn that evening or overnight, and he gets 2 torches from said friend. Now, keep this in mind, again, with, pulling the different friends in and doing this and doing that. One thing that popped into my mind, and this is pure sofa speculation, but when it was like he knew about this property through a former relationship and I wonder if in his demented mind, he's thinking, I'm going to put the bodies on this guy's property to try and frame him. You know what I'm saying? Because when you see how sick this guy is, that's how somebody like this would think, right? But again, that's sofa speculation. I do not know. So let's move on to Thursday the 22nd. So this is where Bo leaves Bungonia in that white van. He goes back to the city and he remains there before here he goes to another acquaintance's home in Newcastle. Now this is getting close to where he turns himself in and it all kind of blows up in his face. Now he didn't disclose anything this says to the acquaintance, but asked for access to a host. Remember who I talked about? This is that coworker who we just talked about a second ago. So again, you see is boom, boom, boom. He's going to all these different people and pulling them into a situation who are now sitting here saying, oh my God, my coworker I've known, I gave him my hose. I had a man who just took the life of 2 people on my sofa. I mean, can you imagine? So 11:30, detectives say a third person, later identified as Bo, may be able to assist with the investigation, and they raid a home in Balmain thought to be connected to him. Now we're moving on to Friday, February 23rd of the timeline. So it says 5 a.m. Bo is believed to have stayed in Newcastle area until early Friday morning. 6:15 a.m. he returns to Sydney. 10:39 a.m. he hands himself in at the police station. He's wearing a black t-shirt and cap. We'll see the video in a minute, but you see the picture here. A few hours later, they charge him with 2 counts of murder. Lamar appears before local court. He does not apply for bail, and matters adjourned until April 23rd. This is by 4 p.m. So you see what I'm talking about, where it's like boom, 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 boom. This just like escalates very quickly. So there's that. Now let's go ahead on to Monday, February 26th. So it says here that Deputy Commissioner David Hudson provides more details of the case, and the details include the Glock pistol that Bo allegedly used for Monday's murder may have been stored at the police station, and after the shootings before being returned to the storage at Miranda Police Station. It says there were approvals within the organization for firearms to be stored at home as well. A break-in, remember this, allegedly occurred at Jesse's house in August 2023. At the time, Jesse and Baird were still in some form of a relationship. So remember all the weird stuff that's going on and whatnot? We'll talk about that in a second, but just keep that in mind. So then police allege that Bo sent messages using Jesse's phone, pretending to be him after he took their lives, telling his housemates he was potentially moving to Western Australia and to deal with his property. So see, he's covering his tracks, because one thing to remember, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is he had like housemates and whatnot, and one of them actually prodded the surfboard bags, we'll get to that again in a second, that were there that probably contained the bodies. It's absolutely horrifying. So let's continue. It says investigators allege that Jesse's crimes followed months of predatory behavior that culminated in a fatal double shooting. Now, by February 27th, the detectives interview him at the Silverwater Jail in Western Sydney. They find the human remains by 1 o'clock. Investigators announce they have established a crime scene at a second property about 20 minutes from the first. And by 3:30, Karen Webb says at a press conference, "We believe we have located 2 bodies. The families have been notified." They're confident that it was Luke and Jesse, and of course by now, especially if you follow this and you're watching this, you'll know this as well. There's that for the timeline. Now, a couple of things here before we move on to a couple of clips and whatnot is, like I said, first of all, he's doing this, and Bo is going through this absolutely stalker's behavior. Again, if you watch that documentary that we just covered here, Lover, Stalker, Killer, same type thing where they get with somebody and they become unhinged. One thing that went through my mind, and just a little bit that Jesse's friends and people like that who are kind of like in the know have shown us, I'm sure to someone as sick as Bo, Jesse was like creme de la creme. He's gorgeous. He has an amazing personality. He has celebrity, money, right? So this guy, Bo, was going to be like, I'm getting this man, right? Period. And he was probably, in Bo's world, he was so close. If they had some kind of situationship going on, he's probably like, I'm so close to having him, and just couldn't reel in the crazy. You know what I mean? By like posting the Instagram photos and this kind of stuff, and it just scared him off and he could not handle that. That's kind of my theory of what went down. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to move into some news clips and look at some things. Now, remember how I talked about those surfboard bags? Let's look at a couple of clips about those bags and talk about it.
You were looking at accused killer Bo Lamar Condon at Miranda Westfield, just 3 hours after he allegedly murdered Jesse Baird and Luke Davies. Same store and same purchase. The police constable walking in with a friend. They leave with a surfboard bag slung over his shoulder. This time, a bag police alleged to use to dispose of Jesse.
Okay, so you see, he goes for one, thinking, I'm just going to take Jesse's life. Here's what I'm doing. He gets there and Luke is there. He has to take both of them out. And thank God nobody else is there, right? Then he gets his friend and goes and gets a secondary bag. So again, remember how I was saying he's pulling all these people that don't even know that they're being part of this story into it. This guy probably had no idea that they were going to get a surfboard bag, other than for the obvious reason of going to get a surfboard bag, right? So here you go with this, but it also is so haunting to me to see, when you see how casual it's like, you have bodies in a house and you're able to like function and like be around somebody else and go get a bag and go do this. And I would be a complete mess and wreck, right? It would be so obvious. Everybody would be like, what's wrong, Paul? Now maybe they did do that with him, I don't know, right? But at the end of the day, it's just so haunting when we see footage like this. Now obviously this all leads up to the victims being found, and let's look at a quick montage of when all that went down.
Fast forward 8 days to Tuesday, they were found inside 2 surfboard bags dumped 200 kilometres away on a property at Bungonia, southwest of Sydney.
Good afternoon, Davina. That is right. We have just heard the news that the bodies of TV presenter Jesse Baird and his boyfriend Luke Davies have been found, and that the families of the two men have just been notified.
That prison where he's currently being held in Sydney yesterday. And I've been told detectives, they know that Beau Lamar knew this property. This wasn't a random place. This was all part of the plan where he was going to leave these two men's bodies.
Now, like I said, in a haunting twist, he pulled other people into this crime along the way. Let's listen to one little segment about that. You've already heard so much of what we talked about as well, but let's just listen to this real quick and then continue on.
While staying in Newcastle with a friend the night before he handed himself in, accused killer Beau Lamar Condon told her his white van was full of blood and he needed to clean it out. Police facts outline this conversation between the pair, recounted by the witness.
This morning I was floating in a dam. I drove 2.5 hours away with a girl to a farm.
Are we talking about Goulburn, that sort of direction?
I don't know. There was a dam. The body wouldn't sink. The girl panicked and wanted to go home. I drove the girl back home 2.5 hours, then I drove back to the dam. I said to myself that I have to get this sorted and clean up my mess. I am me, but it's not me.
The following day, that woman who travelled with Lamar Condon to Goulburn also came forward, telling police after visiting the dam she noticed a blue tarp that had been covering things in the back of the van was now missing.
Can you imagine? I would love to know more about her story because it sounds like she didn't know what was going on. But in that one part, the way they the conversation they recount, where he's saying the body wouldn't sink and the girl freaked out, it's almost like, well, was she there? But then she says, well, then when we left, I noticed the tarp wasn't there anymore. But also go back to the article we talked about where she was saying she waited up there for a couple of hours or whatever it was. So what I think happened is he took some girl, whoever this was, out there, and he told her something. He gave some reason that they were breaking into this property and doing this and doing that. And so he took this stuff and whatever he was doing, he went and tried to do it. It wouldn't work. She's freaking out because they could have been there on the premise of, who knows, he could have said something to the degree of like, look, I messed up at work and I stole some drugs from the, evidence room and I need to get rid of them, or, you know what I'm saying? Like something, right? Something that she knew was not right, but maybe not to this level. But I don't know. Again, that's sofa speculation there, right? Then you hear the conversation of him having with his coworker, female cop who gave the hose. That's who they're talking about here, who's recounting the conversation that he had. So many people he pulled into this web, but oftentimes that's what these personality types do. They pull all these people and they don't care who gets victimized. They don't care who gets thrown under the bus. Now, one thing in looking into this case and learning about Luke and Jesse is how much the community loved them, how much their friends loved them, how much their family loved them. Let's look at some clips here of how everyone came together to remember them.
In a crowd of more than 1,000 people, it was the faces of friends and colleagues that stood out most. There were tears and hugs as memories of Jesse Baird and Luke Davies were played at Green Park last night.
That was a huge outpouring there. Now, on the screen here, you're going to see a screenshot. His sister, she honored him on Instagram and she made this post. I'll just read it real quickly. It says, "I'll now forever be watching the sky for the brightest star, the colorful rainbows and the butterflies fluttering around. And I'll know that is you holding me up, Courtney Baird." Such a beautiful statement to be made by a sibling. I just think that's amazing. And let's look at one way that the airline is honoring Luke.
This year's Qantas Mardi Gras float will proudly display his name, a party that will be sorely missing the beloved flight attendant.
I think that's pretty amazing that the airline is doing that. They did have a moment of silence and honored them at the Mardi Gras as well. Now, it might have already happened when you watch this, but that was the plan of that honoring in a moment of silence and whatnot. So, that being said, let's talk a little bit now where we stand with things. So, as you can imagine, Beau, there's no bail, right? So, he's in protective custody. He has hired an attorney who used to be a detective. His name is Solicitor John Walford. They served 20 years in the NSW police force, where he was a senior criminal investigator, qualified criminal analyst, and prosecutor. That's via Daily Mail. Now, after he did make his court appearance, he was sent, and Beau, to Metropolitan Remand and Reception Center, MRRC, at Silverwater, and that's where he's being held in protective custody. Now, like I said earlier, there is some kind of a hearing of some sort scheduled for April 23rd, so we'll just kind of be on the lookout to see what comes from that. Now, let's just talk about this for a minute. One thing that really just stuck out to me in this is, number one, how Luke was completely at the wrong place at the wrong time, right? There's twofold with that, because obviously it's awful no matter what, whose life was taken, but it also shows me how focused in Bo was just on Jesse, right? Because at first I was like, oh, it sounds like he wanted to get both of them, but now it looks more like, no, Luke just happened to be there, and unfortunately he had to go. Again, going back to the thing where his friend is like, and by his friend I mean Luke's friend, is like, we were texting at 9:18 and literally moments later this went down. Absolutely bone chilling. I can't imagine. I would never delete their voicemail. I would never delete their text. I would go back over them over and over and over again. It gives me goosebumps, and I don't even know these people personally, right? So I can only imagine if you were actually related. Now, again, moving back over to Bo, what I think is interesting is this question of like, what was he doing to fund this lifestyle? I mean, there's pictures in private jets with Louis Vuitton bags and this and that. And I get that anybody can get that stuff in this day and age. I mean, these brands, these situations have made themselves accessible for not just the uber wealthy, right? So I understand that. But it is kind of bizarre to see where it's like this cop who, my understanding is you have to pass some kind of psychological thing to even become that, right? Was able to do that, you know, being this unhinged and then doing this Instagram lifestyle of these, you know, sultry half-naked pictures in the jets and Louis Vuitton and Hermes, and I'm here and I'm with Rihanna, I'm with Kourtney Kardashian, you name it, right? He just seems honestly like a completely vile human being. And what it sounds to me like is Jesse probably met him at the club. He's an attractive dude, right? So Jesse was probably, oh yeah, this guy's kind of hot. Remember, people like Bo and these people are very charming at first. They know how to pull you in, right? And so that probably went down, and Bo was probably keeping it together because this was probably like, oh my gosh, this is who I'm going to get with. I will have celebrity. This is accessible, you know, because this isn't like a celebrity like, you know, Madonna or somebody like that, right? This is like a local celebrity. So to someone like Bo, who's very obsessed with that and image, this is going to be major, right? He probably saw cha-ching, cha-ching, and just all sorts of stuff. You know, lots of Instagram followers and all this crazy, you know, stuff that just doesn't matter. And so Jesse obviously started seeing the crazy, you know what I mean? Where he was like, no, thank you. And Bo couldn't take it. And then if Bo was aware that Jesse was seeing somebody else, that would have just fueled the fire. Now, like I said, as far as like all these other people pulled into it, I mean, you heard the one person talking about the conversation, the coworker with the hose, the girl who went to the actual crime scene, the roommate, the housemate who nudged the surfboard bags and said it felt lumpy and then saw blood on the floor, but she thought it was, there's some kind of drink that Jesse drinks, and she was like, I just thought he spilled something, but now they know it's his blood. I mean, just the list goes on. For as pre-plotted as this was, it was incredibly messy. Now, obviously, thank God it was messy because it led to him getting caught, right? The preferred thing would have been for it not to have happened in the first place, though. I get that. So we're going to follow this, see what happens with it. My heart aches for the community, for the parents, for the loved ones, for the friends, and obviously for Jesse and Luke. So that's it. If you're still watching, I do appreciate it. Roscoe does ask that you drop some sofas down in the comment section. And until he and I ride all the way down there to the comment section to hang out on that sofa and talk about this and other cases, we'll see y'all soon. I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now, don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. Also, if you're looking for merch, be sure to check out my Teespring store. I'll put that up here. And then, like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Roscoe on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.